January 24, 1966. It was just after 8 in the morning when Air India Flight 101 was preparing to land. Minutes before touchdown, the plane disappeared from the radar. A short while later, it crashed into a mountain 15,000 feet above sea level. 117 people on board were killed, and one of them was a 56-year-old scientist. His name was Homi Jehangir Bhabha. If you have never heard of that name, I'm not surprised, but in 1966, his death sent shockwaves through governments around the world.
It shows the absolute necessity of finding some new source of energy.
He was the man who built India's nuclear program. He built the reactors, he trained the scientists, and quietly, he placed India in a position where it could build a nuclear weapon. And then one day, he was gone. But here's the part that raised questions. Just 13 days earlier, India's Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri had also died unexpectedly. Two of India's most powerful men, both connected to nuclear program, dead within 2 weeks. This is the story of the man who gave India the atomic age. A man who built a nuclear establishment from nothing, and who may have paid the ultimate price for his ambition. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Rahul and I create documentary style videos on anything that I'm curious about. If you enjoy the video that you're watching today, please consider subscribing. It genuinely motivates me to create more videos like this. And now with that said, let's get back. Homi Bhabha was born on October 30, 1909 in Bombay. He was born into privilege. His father was a prominent lawyer and his mother came from the Tata family. From early on, Bhabha's parents had a safe plan for him. He was expected to become an engineer and eventually take over to manage the Tata Steel business. It was a perfect future at the time. Bhabha went to Cambridge to study engineering. But very quickly he realized he didn't want any of it, so he did something unexpected. He wrote a letter to his father, a letter that would later change Indian science forever.
Business or working as an engineer is not for me. Physics is what I want to do. I am burning with a desire to do physics.
His father agreed, but with one condition. Bhabha had to finish what he started first, engineering, and he had to finish it with top honors. Only then he would be free to choose his path. Bhabha accepted, and he delivered exactly that. In 1930, he graduated with first-class honors. Then, he pivoted to mathematics and physics. In 1932, he graduated again with top honors. Now, like his father said, he was free to do whatever he wanted. Cambridge in the 1930s was the perfect place to be free. The physics laboratories were buzzing with discovery. The neutron had just been discovered, atoms were being split, and the future of physics was being written in real time. Bhabha jumped into the world of physics. By 1935, at just 26, he earned his PhD for work focused on cosmic radiation. That same year, he also solved the exact mathematics on how electrons and positrons scatter. Even to this day, that equation carries his name, Bhabha scattering. Almost overnight, the young man from Bombay became famous. In 1941, at just 31, he received one of the highest honors in science. He was elected a Fellow of Royal Society in London. He could have stayed in the UK, built a legendary career, worked alongside the greatest minds of the century. He'd already studied in Copenhagen, worked in Rome, and was about to join one of Britain's top universities. But then, World War II began.
The atomic bomb exploded over Hiroshima.
Bhabha was visiting India when the war broke out. International travel had completely stopped and he was stranded. It was supposed to be temporary, a few months maybe, but the war lasted 6 long years, and during that time, everything in Bhabha's life changed. In 1939, Bhabha faced a problem. He was stuck in India as the world went to war. And compared to what he had seen in Cambridge, India had almost nothing for advanced science, specifically for physics. There were no serious laboratories for research. If he wanted to continue his work, he'd have to build it himself. In 1940, he received an invitation from C.V. Raman. Raman asked him to join IISc in Bangalore, and Bhabha was more than happy to accept. And in IISc Bangalore, he set up a cosmic ray research unit. He started small with a handful of researchers, basic equipment, and very little funding, because the war made everything much harder. But Bhabha's vision was already much larger than one laboratory. Later he would reflect on the problem he saw in India. There was no real home for cutting-edge physics. Talented people were scattered across the country. Most of them worked alone, far below what they were capable of. So in 1943, he wrote a letter to his cousin, J.R.D. Tata. Inside it was a bold proposal to create a dedicated institution for fundamental research. In March 1944, he sent a detailed plan to Tata Trust. And this is where his foresight becomes clear. He didn't argue only for pure science, he argued for the future. He wrote, when nuclear energy starts being used for power in say 20 years from now, India will not have to look abroad for experts. We will have our own people ready. Remember this moment, it was 1944, the atomic bomb had not even been dropped. Most of the world had no idea what nuclear energy could become. But Bhabha had already seen it coming, and he wanted India to be ready. In April 1944, the Tata Trust approved the proposal. And just a year later, in June 1945, Bhabha founded the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, TIFR. TIFR did not begin in a grand campus, it began inside Bhabha's childhood home. From there, modern Indian science began to take shape. Bhabha personally selected young scientists. He brought back Indians who had studied abroad, he trained local talent. Research groups were formed to study nuclear physics, electronics and mathematics. Some of these teams were later moved to Trombay and they would become the core of India's nuclear energy program. By the time India became independent in 1947, TIFR was already up and running. Something had changed in Bhabha during the war years. He had gone to Cambridge as a young man chasing his own dreams. He came out of war as something else. After independence in 1947, Bhabha's role changed. He was no longer just building institutions, he was planning the future of Indian science. At the center of this shift was one relationship, his partnership with Jawaharlal Nehru, India's first Prime Minister. Years later, Indira Gandhi would recall that her father always made time for Bhabha, no matter how busy he was. In 1948, Bhabha made another proposal, that India needed an atomic energy commission, one that would report only to the Prime Minister. The idea was accepted immediately. India's Atomic Energy Commission was created and Bhabha became its first chairman. Nehru also insisted that nuclear work remain a secret, and that secrecy meant very few people knew what was happening. In practice, there was only one real oversight channel, the Nehru-Bhabha relationship. By the early 1950s, Bhabha became indispensable. He was the director of TIFR, the head of Atomic Energy Commission, a role you can imagine with minister-level power. He believed India must control every step of nuclear technology, and to make that possible, he designed an ambitious strategy, a three-stage nuclear program built around India's unique resource, thorium. Stage 1, use natural uranium in reactors to produce plutonium. Stage 2, use that plutonium in special reactors to convert thorium into uranium-233. Stage 3, use the uranium-233 in advanced reactors. Like this, a complete fuel cycle could be entirely controlled by India. This plan was unlike anything else in the world. Under Bhabha's leadership, India began building step by step. In 1956, India became the first Asian country outside Soviet Union to operate a nuclear reactor. Its name was Apsara. Then came Cyrus. Cyrus had a special significance. It could produce a large amount of weapon-grade plutonium. Years later, in 1974, the plutonium used in India's first nuclear test would come from this very reactor. By the mid-1960s, India had built an extraordinary system. No other newly independent country had achieved this level of control over nuclear technology. Dr. P.K. Iyengar would say, from the very beginning, Bhabha wanted India to become a nuclear weapon state. After China's nuclear test in 1964, he was clear that India must have the ability to build nuclear weapons. When Nehru died in 1964, the new Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri also acted immediately. He confirmed that Bhabha would continue as chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission. By this point, Bhabha was no longer just advising the state, he was part of it. On October 16, 1964, China tested its first atomic bomb. For India, the news landed hard. Just 2 years earlier, India had fought and lost a war against China. And now that same neighbor had the ultimate weapon. Across India's political spectrum, quietly a question began to spread. When would India be a nuclear power? In capitals around the world, diplomats took notice of this situation and began watching India very carefully. The world was about to get an answer. About a week after China's test, Homi Bhabha went on air. He said that anything meant to stop countries from acquiring nuclear weapons must offer them as much benefit as they would gain by acquiring them. If given an approval, India could build a nuclear bomb in 18 months. That statement itself hit like a shockwave. The message was clear. India would not accept being treated as a second-class power. Until then, Indian officials had been very careful. They spoke only about peaceful nuclear energy. Weapons were described as unnecessary and even immoral. But now Bhabha was speaking openly about timelines. Not 10 years or not some day, but 18 months. And coming from a man like him was no bluff. By late 1964, India already had most of what it needed. A working reactor for producing plutonium and a processing plant at Trombay capable of extracting it. International observers clearly understood what exactly that meant. The United States certainly did. India, he said, could build a bomb in 18 months if it chose to. But Bhabha didn't stop there. He explained that India's plutonium facilities could eventually produce enough material for 100 bombs a year. Inside India, though, not everyone agreed with his timelines. Some scientists, including Vikram Sarabhai, expressed their discomfort. India still lacks certain industrial capacities and the schedule, they argued, was too ambitious. However, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri, normally a cautious and restrained man, began to align with Bhabha's thinking.
तलवार की नोक पर या एटम बम के डर से कोई हमारे देश को झुकाना चाहे, दबाना चाहे, ये देश हमारा दबने वाला नहीं.
By late 1965, he reportedly gave informal approval to prepare for what was called a peaceful nuclear explosion. India was close, very close. With enough plutonium for small number of weapons, designs within the reach of capable scientists, India was now one political decision away from joining the nuclear club. By the mid-1960s, India's nuclear capability had entered a new phase. It was no longer just a national project, it was now part of the Cold War. Across the world, major powers were watching, especially Washington, Moscow and Beijing. The US had once supported India's peaceful nuclear work, but that was in the 1950s. But after China's test and Bhabha's 18-month statement, Americans' attitude shifted. They tried to persuade India to step back from the weapons path. But Bhabha was always there to push back. With all this happening among countries, Washington and Moscow found a common ground. They began drafting a new global agreement called the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Bhabha opposed this treaty from the start. He saw it as fundamentally unfair and it would lock India out of nuclear weapons forever.
The treaty's purposes are very simple. To commit the nations of the world which do not now have nuclear weapons not to produce or receive them in the future.
India had to either cooperate on non-proliferation or face consequences. The Soviet Union, while friendly to India, was also uneasy. Moscow did not want another nuclear state coming into power. They assured India that Soviet friendship would be enough to handle China. On the other hand, Pakistan was the most alarmed country. They understood what an Indian bomb would mean for the region. Foreign Minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto publicly stated that if India built the bomb, Pakistan would eat grass and leaves to build one too. The last thing these Cold War superpowers needed was a wave of new nuclear states in the 1970s. By early January 1966, the world was holding its breath wondering if India could pull off a nuclear test. But then, everything changed. Let's begin with what we know for certain. On Jan 24, 1966, Homi Bhabha boarded Air India Flight 101 in Bombay. He was travelling to Vienna to attend a meeting of International Atomic Energy. As per the plan, he was meant to fly the day before, but at the last moment, he changed his plans. Some reports suggest he stayed back to handle urgent matters in Bombay, including the suicide of a young colleague in Trombay. So by the morning of January 24, Flight 101 was approaching Geneva, Switzerland. It was a Boeing 707 and the pilot was Captain J.T. D'Souza. All systems, he reported, were functioning normally. At around 8:02 in the morning, just minutes before landing, Flight 101 disappeared from the radar. Geneva Air Traffic Control had cleared the flight to land. They believed the plane had already passed Mont Blanc. Captain D'Souza radioed his altitude 19,000 feet, well above the mountain's peak. But something there was wrong. The flight's actual position was not where the crew thought it was. With heavy fog, snow and whiteout condition, the plane had drifted. Moments later, Air India Flight 101 slammed into Mont Blanc. 117 people on board were killed, including Homi Jehangir Bhabha. French rescue team reached the site by helicopter 3 hours later and found no survivors. So the question is, why did the plane hit the mountain? The flight recorder would normally answer that, but it was never found. One detail, however, refused to disappear. An Italian pilot flying nearby reported something unusual. Around the time Flight 101 vanished, he saw a strange black cloud over Mont Blanc. It did not look like ordinary cloud cover. To him, it resembled a massive explosion. That single observation ignited speculation. Was there a bomb on board? The official investigation lasted over a year. In March 1967, French authorities released their findings. The cause, they said, was navigation error, not sabotage or a bomb. Severe whiteout condition had disoriented the crew. Captain de Souza believed the flight had crossed the mountain, but in reality, it had not. And in the blinding snow, the mountain was never visible to the pilot. So the conclusion was clear. It was pilot error, an accident. The government of India accepted the findings and no second investigation was ordered. Officially, Homi Bhabha died in a plane crash, one of 117 lives lost that morning. The story could have ended there, but it did not. 13 days before Bhabha's flight crashed, another death shook India. On January 11, 1966, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri died suddenly. He was in Tashkent negotiating peace with Pakistan, and suddenly that night, he was found dead. The official cause was a heart attack. Two of India's most powerful figures, both connected to nuclear program, gone within 2 weeks. It was too convenient for those who wanted India to remain without nuclear weapons. And so the questions began. Who would benefit from Bhabha's removal? Any power that wanted to stop India's nuclear ambitions.
It shows the absolute necessity of finding some new source of energy if the light of our civilization is not to be extinguished.
The United States had clear reasons. It was trying to halt nuclear proliferation, and Bhabha was the biggest obstacle in India. The Soviet Union, though friendly to India, also opposed new nuclear powers. China had no interest in seeing India match its new status, and Pakistan clearly feared an Indian bomb. So motive existed, that much is undeniable. But motive is not proof. For decades there was nothing concrete, only a feeling that something quiet never added up. Then in 2008, a claim surfaced. An American writer, Gregory Douglas, published a book. And in the book, he claimed to record conversations with a retired CIA officer named Robert T. Crowley. According to Douglas, Crowley said Bhabha was warned to stop and that he was too arrogant to listen.
Name was Homi Bhabha. That one was dangerous, believe me. He had an unfortunate accident. He was flying to Vienna to stir up more trouble when his 707 had a bomb go off in the cargo hold, and they all came down on a high mountain way up in the Alps.
Crowley claimed that Bhabha's Boeing 707 was sabotaged. He even claimed that Prime Minister Shastri was poisoned in Tashkent. If these statements were true, they would have been explosive by now. They would rank among the most shocking revelations in Cold War history. But there is a problem. Gregory Douglas is widely regarded as unreliable. His work has a history of questionable claims. The transcripts have never been independently verified, so the Crowley theory must be treated as unproven, possibly fabricated. But one fact cannot be disputed. After Bhabha's death, India's nuclear weapons effort slowed dramatically. Dr. Vikram Sarabhai took over as chairman of Atomic Energy Commission. Sarabhai was brilliant, but he opposed nuclear weapons on principle. He believed bombs were waste of resources India desperately needed. From 1966 to 1971, there was no push for nuclear test. The momentum that existed under Bhabha came to a halt. Only after Sarabhai's death in 1971 did the program accelerate again. Whether this was simply a change in leadership or something more deliberate, we cannot know for sure, but the outcome was undeniable. India went quiet, exactly the result many global powers wanted. It is possible that Bhabha was killed. The timing, the stakes, and who benefited, together they form suspicion. But there is no evidence to support it. Somewhere inside the ice of Mont Blanc, a black box that could answer everything remains buried forever. In 1967, the Atomic Energy Establishment at Trombay was renamed. It became the Bhabha Atomic Research Center. Years later, it was under Indira Gandhi that India argued for nuclear disarmament and still refused to sign the treaty. Then on May 18, 1974, 8 years after Bhabha's death, India crossed the line. At Pokhran, India conducted its first nuclear test with the code name Smiling Buddha. It's a story of its own for another video, but the plutonium that was used for this test came from Cyrus, the reactor that Bhabha had built.
Today, at 15:45 hours, India conducted 3 underground nuclear tests in the Pokhran range.
He did not live to see it, but the design, the preparation, the path, everything had his imprint. Today, India stands as a declared nuclear power, and the reason for that is Homi Jehangir Bhabha.